Hi, my name is Eddie, and I work as the maintenance guy at a seaside amusement park called Ruby Pier. I'm gonna tell you my journey to heaven in 30 minutes. But before we talk about heaven, let's talk about my last couple minutes on earth. I don't remember much, but these memories keep replaying in my head. I remember being so strong, healthy, and active. And once at Ruby Pier, I fought another guy because he power checked my older brother Joe. I really miss those days. Anyway, while I was cleaning, I saw my coworker Dominguez. He worked with me in maintenance at Ruby Pier. I remember he was going on a trip to Mexico, so I lent him $40 as a gift and told him to buy something nice for his wife. I didn't work at the pier my entire life though. I was actually in the military for a while. But I ended up coming back to the pier. Even though I love Ruby Pier, I still had a lot of dreams that I wanted to follow, but I just never got to it. However, Ruby Pier did bring me to one of the greatest things in my life, my lovely wife Marguerite, my one true love. This was long ago when we were still teenagers at Ruby Pier. We were dancing by the ocean and it was so mesmerizing. I remember the dark color of Marguerite's hair falling over her shoulder as she waved goodnight to me. After that night, I went home and told my brother Joe that Marguerite was a girl that I wanted to marry. There was always this little girl who would come up to me and knew me by the maintenance guy. I don't remember her name, but it sounds something like Amy or Annie, and she asked me to make her a pipe cleaner rabbit. I suddenly heard a scream and looked for where the noise was coming from. I saw a ride with a cart full of passengers about to tip over. It was Freddy's Freefall. This ride goes up 200 feet in the sky and drops right back to the ground. I told the workers to get a ladder and hold the ride long enough to get the passengers out. I thought everything was going good considering all of the people cheering, but the cart itself was about to fall. I told everyone to move back, but they were so loud that no one could hear me. I noticed Amy standing under the cart and my only instinct was to save her, so I did. I was lost, and it seemed like the roller coaster incident happened years ago. It was all so blurry. All I thought about was if I saved Annie or Amy, whoever it was. But what surprised me was that I couldn't feel sad or suffering. All I felt was peace. I woke up in the body of my childhood self. I was 5 years old again. I was surprised at how young and lively I felt. Everything looked the same way it did at the time. I decided to run around the entire amusement park just to get the feel of old moments. I came across this familiar tent and I decided to walk inside. I heard the announcer describing the most ugly man in the world. I walked through the dark hallways and came across this blue tinted man. I immediately recognized him, the Blue Man. He saw that I was overwhelmed, but he managed to calm me down. He told me that I'm dead and that I was in heaven. He explained to me that the reason why I felt like a child was because I was a child when I met him. I was disappointed that heaven looked like Ruby Pier. But he explained to me that there are many stages of going through heaven. He told me that my voice was taken away so that I can listen better. He explains that I'm going to meet 5 people in heaven to help me understand my experiences on earth. Each of these people have changed my life in some way and have important connections, whether I noticed it or not. My voice finally came back and I asked him what killed you. He said that I did it. Apparently when I was 5 years old, I was playing ball with my brother Joe. It rolled onto the road all the way to the circus tent, and being the little kid I was, I ran after it. This hairy man came out and asked us what we were doing. It was really scary, but I just took the ball. I knew I wasn't the reason. First of all, that's not all that happened. I was driving when you ran across the road to get the ball. I slammed on the brakes to avoid you, but my heart started racing. Lost control. I turned into an alley and hit a parked car. I got out to see what happened, but I had a heart attack and died. I felt so bad to know that I was the reason he died. I kept asking for forgiveness. But he explained to me that the reason he met me in heaven was not to punish me, but to teach me. He then told me that all lives intersect and that death is inevitable. He told me that the cycle of life connects everyone and that strangers are just family you have yet to come to know. As he left, I asked him if he knew whether or not I saved the little girl from the ride. He didn't answer me, so I assumed that I didn't, but I could have sworn that I felt her hands touch mine after I saved her. He told me the only time we waste is the time we spend thinking we're alone. His skin changed from blue to its normal color, and before I knew it, I was in the sky. I woke up on a familiar battleground in a jungle during a storm. I heard explosions and thunder, and the next thing I knew it, I was running. I felt so strong, just like my days back when I was a soldier. The military taught me many things. 1, to appear unbothered when seeing the desperation of others. 2, to pray silently. And 3, to live efficiently with hunger, cold, lack of shelter, and illness. I never really wanted to join the military. My dad was a very cold man who would get drunk and constantly beat me and my brother. He made me feel as if violence was what made me a man. I felt scared, and I didn't even think that I could feel this way in heaven. I looked around the jungle and realized that this was a place of my nightmares. A voice called my name from the trees. It was my captain. I ran over to him and he told me that he's the second person I'm meeting in heaven. Seeing my captain again reminded me of the time we were held captive in the Philippines. There were 3 men in my unit, Rebozo, Morton, and Smitty. We were all under the captain. For 1 month every night, Rebozo would scream for the chance of someone hearing us. Morton went crazy and started talking to himself. And Smitty didn't even know what to do. He stayed silent every night. Our enemies would feed us rice balls crawling with bugs. It was disgusting. There were 4 soldiers that we named Crazy 1, Crazy 2, Crazy 3, and Crazy 4. They seemed as desperate and as malnourished as we were. They eventually moved us to a dark coal mine. The only thing that kept me sane was a picture of Marguerite that I kept in my helmet. Rebozo caught a fever and fell while we were working. Crazy 2 picks him up and forces him to keep working. I try to speak up, but Crazy 2 picks up a gun and shoots Rebozo dead in the head. Since then, I gave up on praying. No amount of praying or praise towards God could help me endure the torture, and I realized that we were being held to be worked to death. But one day, I came up with a plan. I saw Crazy 3 juggling pieces of coal. I distracted him by showing the correct way to juggle. While they were distracted, I signaled to my unit to attack the Crazies by pretending my instructions were part of the tune that I was singing. I stopped juggling, threw the coal to 2 of the Crazies, and 2 of my men took their guns while they were done, and we managed to kill them all. Before we killed the last of the Crazies, Smitty took the gun and said, "For Rebozo," before pulling the trigger. We burned the whole place down. As the village was up in flames, there was one last hut that was still intact. However, I saw a small child-sized shadow moving inside. I wanted to save the child's life, so I called for them to come up. Morton rushed me to burn the place down, but I kept calling for the child. I wasn't paying attention, and I stepped in a flame when my leg caught on fire. I felt something shoot through the back of my leg, and I fell. Someone pulled me back and I passed out. I'm the captain, and I'm the one who shot his leg. He was getting distracted. He would have gotten caught. He knows what I taught him. Nobody gets left behind. I put him in the vehicle and nursed his wounds, but there was something blocking our escape route. I got out to move the gate in our way, but stepped on a landmine, and that's why I died. That's why I'm here. I was so upset that he took away running and dancing because he shot me. He took the things that made me me. I felt that there was no purpose to living. But I was so sad that he died super young, and I felt guilty that he's been waiting for me in heaven for so long. My captain explains that death only appears to be the end because life or death is all humans have known before they die. He told me that he was there to teach me to make sacrifices. He says that when you sacrifice something precious, you're not really losing it. You're passing it on to someone else. He told me that when he died helping his unit escape, he got to keep his promise, and that was to not leave anyone behind. I asked him why he chose heaven as his battleground. The captain explains that he grew up in a military family and went straight to battle. It became the only life he knew. I asked him if I saved Amy or Annie from the falling car, and he too didn't know. I felt a gust of wind pick me up, and I again was traveling through the clouds of heaven. I landed on a snow-capped mountain. I felt heavy and slow like I did when I was in my middle ages. came across an old-fashioned diner which I didn't recognize. Looking through a window, I saw people dressed from different decades. Many people were badly wounded. I was shocked when I saw my father inside with them. I called, but he couldn't hear me. I can still feel the pain by his silence through the window. A woman with a long skirt spoke to me outside. She introduced herself as a third person. She tells me that my father wasn't really in the diner because we were in her heaven. I was frustrated meeting with a stranger when I thought being in heaven meant being with those I lost in my life and finding peace after life. She told me that I should make peace on my own. I remember the fish I saw flopping hopelessly in nets at Ruby Pier. That's the way I felt, trapped and hopeless for all of my life after the war. The woman told me that she knew me, but I didn't know her. She told me her story. She was once a young, pretty waitress at the diner. She rejected the advances of many men until a rich, handsome businessman came to her diner. He took her to a beautiful sea resort and bought her extravagant things. When he proposed to her, he promised to make her an amusement park near the seaside. He put his blood, sweat, and tears into this project. A few years later, he brought her to the pier that he named after her, Ruby Pier. She brought me to a scene from my past and told me that my father wasn't as bad as he seemed. On a stormy night, one of my dad's friends, Mickey Shea, was drunk and sobbing in the kitchen. My mom was tending to him. My mom was going into her bedroom and he followed her up there. He pushed her against the wall and tried to touch her against her will. My dad came home and saw the scene, but Mickey ran out. My dad ran after him into the storm, and he found him at the beach. They both fell into the tide while they were fighting, but the water caught Mickey, and my dad decided to save him. He pulled Mickey out of the water, but he was too exhausted and half-conscious. The two laid on the stormy shore for hours before they could return. Ruby told me that my dad died from the pneumonia he caught from the beach the night he saved Mickey. I was shocked to know Mickey's attempt to rape my own mother. I was so angry and would have let Mickey die after what he did. Ruby reminded me that Mickey has done many kind things for my family over the years, like getting my father's job at the pier and lending my family money when I was born when they were struggling. She told me that Mickey lost his job that day, and he was acting out of loneliness and pain. She told me that a person's death, that is a sacrifice for a friend, is a worthy reason to die. She reminded me of how weak my father was in the hospital, and how he was unable to speak. She told me that my dad didn't die in his sleep as the nurses said he did, but he died the night before, leaning out over the open window, and how he regretted all his mistakes and pain that he caused to those he loved. She even told me that my dad called out to us even though we were nowhere near. Ruby told me that she cared about me and my father because my father shared a hospital room with her husband. Ruby explained that the diner was a place where she can keep the souls that were hurt at Ruby Pier safe and warm and far from the ocean. After hearing about my father's death, I reminded Ruby about my father's abusive behavior. She told me that she understands, but that my anger only hurt myself, and that I need to forgive my father. I told her that my life was wasted at Ruby Pier because of him. She denied that and said that I will find out the real reason when I meet the next two people in heaven. I was talking to my dad through the window of the diner, and even though he couldn't hear me, I told him I'm getting rid of my anger, and I said that it's fixed, something I used to tell him when I was a little kid and I would fix some equipment for him. I saw Ruby, in her young form, watching me from a distance. She disappeared into the sky in the color shade jade. I was then taken to a room with a row of doors. I felt like my old self. I realized I was aging the more stages I took into heaven. For some reason, I was at a wedding with people I didn't even know who spoke German. I exited the room, and then I somehow walked into a Swedish one, then a Spanish one, then an African one, then an Italian one, where beautiful bridesmaids were passing out candied almonds, saying, "For the bitter and the sweet." She came up to me, and I realized that it was my young Marguerite. Who knew I would have met up with her in heaven? I couldn't help but hold her and cry into her shoulders. She told me she chose a heaven full of weddings because she loves the moments when a man and women say their vows. She told me that she herself met 5 people in heaven and she learned things and that she's waited for me ever since then. She made me watch a flashback where I was at the horse machine track with my friend on his birthday. I kept betting after each time I won, trying to double my money. I was so excited that I called Marguerite to tell her I was winning, but she was angry and yelled at me. I understood why she was angry. We were planning to adopt a child. I hung up on her, but she decided to come to the racetrack and apologize for yelling at me. When an overpass above the road, 2 teenage boys made a game of throwing glass bottles on cars. One of them hits Marguerite's shield, breaking it and sending her into a concrete divider. After her accident, she was admitted into the hospital and bedridden. I felt so guilty that I was the reason she was on the road to begin with. A few years later, she was cooking in the kitchen when she froze and felt dizzy, then fell to the floor. She had a brain tumor. She went through painful chemotherapy and radiation. On her few last days, she made a big dinner for her friends and relatives. A few days later, she woke up screaming, so I woke and took her to the hospital. On the way there, though, she looked up to the sky and she told me she sees home. I turned to Marguerite and I apologized to her because I didn't give her the life she deserved. I asked her if God knew that I was there, and she told me that He does. And I realized how much of my life I've spent thinking God wasn't paying attention to me. I was angry over her death because she was the only person I loved, but she told me that lost love is still love. She told me that my memories kept our love alive, and she felt my love in heaven too. Finally, she showed me on the final wedding in heaven, where an accordion player played "You Made Me Love You." I realized that it was my wedding song. I was taken to a new place where I saw a young girl waving to me on a hill. She introduced herself to me as Tala. She invited me to sit on her mat and told me the Tagalog words for things around us. She told me that I was the 5th person I was supposed to meet in heaven. I let go of the fact that she was a child. I told her I was sad because I didn't do anything with my life. But Tala told me that I was supposed to be at Ruby Pier. She told me by keeping children safe, I made it good for her. I remembered the little girl, Amy or Annie, and I asked Tala if I was able to pull her out of the way. She told me that she pulled me to heaven, and I disappeared. I felt free of pain, and I found myself back at Ruby Pier. I saw Marguerite waiting for me, then I heard God's voice say to me, I'm home.